Guru Nation, we are live. This is not a regular pod, it's a live stream with the one and only Joel White, who's been on now several times, right?
Yep.
Joel?
Yeah. Good
Market
morning.
Cap Consulting. Joel is one of the, I would say, the best analysis of CRO market that exists. I remember we did recently, I think our last podcast was like a 1 hour debate on the future viability of CROs. And he kind of convinced me that they're not really going anywhere for a while, even though the future may not be bright necessarily in some people's opinions. It's a little murky, but he makes a compelling case for why they are not going anywhere. And I was persuaded. And his last,
Real quick, Dan, what's funny
yeah.
about that is when we first jumped on that, you said, "Hey, you're the guy who called the top on CROs, right?" And I said, "No. But if I had said yes, that timing would have been perfect from like a share price
I
standpoint."
tried to set you up, man. I tried to set you up, but you refused. You refused. You see what happened, man? You should have just said yes.
I mean, I didn't think they were going to the moon right then, but I didn't.
Are you actually
I
invested, like financially, in any of these things, or no?
there's a couple, and it's very small,
Mm.
very small stuff. That's just the nature of how I allocate, anyways. But
But you're a holder, right? You're not a buy and sell.
Ironically, Dan, the probably the most money I ever made on a CRO was a short a few years ago,
Pretty fitting.
and I won't mention anyone. I won't mention any company because
Does it
I'm not
start
here
with
to
an
do
M?
that. But no,
Hmm.
no, it doesn't start with an M, and I won't let you guess anymore. But yeah, that was just like a 1 day earning guess, and I was like, holy moly!
Wow. Okay.
But to talk about like the ability of investment analysts to even predict this stuff. One of the best ones out there. He's great. Predicted that, and you see him on all the earnings calls. Predicted that Fortrea was going to have an absolute horrendous quarter, and they shot up 30%. So it's like the one that was like, this is the one that's absolutely just going to tank. Doomsday scenario was like the one, bright light from the whole one, and it's the one that
Right.
it's you can't predict these things to really much of an extent.
And you've got these 25 slides, which
This record.
I think I can share my screen. It might be easier for people.
Okay.
Let me present my screen and see what's going on here. So I know Brad's the master of this. Can you guys see this?
I can.
Okay, you put some work into this. This is not just something you threw together in like a minute to get likes. This is like hard work, man. But it's part of your job, right? Like this goes hand in hand with what you do for a living.
It does. I mean, if it didn't, I wouldn't do it. But I mean, there are a couple downsides. In case people think that I sit around and write company reports all day. If I write these earnings recap and I mention a company, I'm pretty much precluded from consulting with them. And that's so that's part of the trade-off, but it does drive a lot of visibility. It's not this thing specifically, but LinkedIn is my entire marketing strategy.
Wait, so all these companies, like you mentioned all of them, so you can't work with any of these guys?
It doesn't mean I'm like legally restricted, but in reality, yeah, that's the case. But that's also when I went out on my own, I wasn't going out to work with all the big CROs. I primarily work with small, mid-size, and this drives a lot of great visibility. But I was telling Ted Tradford and Liam Eves last quarter, I've been writing these for myself for 20 years, like since I've been out of college. And a guy named Mike Keynes, who's the CEO of a small, mid-size IRB, about 3 years ago, he encouraged me. He's like, "You got to put these out." And I said, "No one's going to want to read them."
Everyone's gonna want to read them, man. This is some nosy people in this industry.
Nobody cares about CROs. Well, I was wrong. I was wrong.
Yeah, CROs. I mean, sites have their own opinions on them, but let's save that for adding some color. Maybe this is 25 pages. Excellent job, by the way. and
Thank you.
277 engagements since when was this? 1 day ago.
Yeah.
Holy crap! Is this your best performing post ever?
I don't know about you, Dan. I've learned for myself personally to never look at the metrics. But if I did, because like, it could really screw with your mind, right? But
Yeah, the things sometimes you
one's
think are going to
at,
do well don't do well, and sometimes you get surprised.
and for my business, what I do, a high performing post, impressions wise, does not mean it's a high performing post business wise. This one's at 31,000, so it'll probably finish up there. But LinkedIn took one, Dan. It wasn't even the actual recap. It was like a preview of the recap. It was like a year ago. LinkedIn took it to 150. The algorithm just latched onto it. And for me, like that was unreal. I remember Steve Wimmer. I was texting Steve.
Yeah.
I was like, Steve, what do I do? Like I I didn't want that to happen, but yeah. So this is a good one, and I enjoy it. 25 is a lot. That was not the plan, but the universe of companies I'm following, like I'm feeling a little maxed out on it. And then as soon as I feel maxed out, I find out, U.S. Oncology Research is owned by McKesson, an $80 billion company. And then they have a joint venture around Sarah Cannon with HCA Healthcare, another $80 billion company. And I'm like, I can't go there this quarter. I'm gonna have to save that for
Save it for a slow news day or news week.
Yeah. But yeah, this was a joy. I enjoy it. I like the feedback. Had a fun little heckler in the field this quarter, and that was different. But that comes with it. I'm sure you've had to deal with that too. As someone who's 5 times more popular on LinkedIn than I am. Yeah,
we use the block button a few times, but that comes with the territory. I don't use it that often. There's maybe a dozen people over my 15 years that have been blocked.
Yeah, I just told the guy to unfollow me. I didn't want to block him. I didn't want to do that, but I was just like, dude, just bug off.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see how, because you put work into this. This is data. It's not like opinion here.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to the
Here's the earning recap. Okay, so cancellation delays. Numerous companies' bookings were rocked by heavy cancellations and delays. We've seen signs of this throughout the year. So you want to explain this?
Yeah, I mean, this is always something that I look for signs of. Every CRO always, especially larger CROs, you always have cancellations every quarter. That's part of the business. And so you have this cancellation rate that CROs track internally. And, it can be anywhere from 10 to 20%. So what I mean by that is if you have $1 million of new contracts signed in a quarter, you're expecting that you're also going to have 10 to 20% of that value as cancellations of previously signed contracts. That's clinical research, right? Studies start, they get awarded. You can even start working on them. You can even start enrolling patients on them, and then they get canceled for whatever reasons. Medpace was the first one to really, start raising the red flag in the first half of the year. But the commentary from the other bigs, and Medpace is by far the smallest of the bigs, I wouldn't even necessarily call them a big, is, that's just kind of their issue. We're not seeing that. And even Medpace was like, yeah, this is kind of a, first half type issue. And then Q3 is when it hit really just about everybody except Fortrea, but Fortrea has had some of their own issues with this. So, cancellations and delay, that is the bane of a CRO's existence, because you are a resourcing business. You staff up and staff down according to the work. And so your staff according to a certain level of expected cancellations and delays. And when you have a big spike, that throws everything off kilter. And so not only did you see it in Q3, I was very optimistic. Yeah, I wasn't optimistic for at least the next quarter as well. But Dan, next year looks great. Next year always looks great, right?
Really?
Next year always looks great. So we'll see.
Is that the Cliff Notes version? Like next year's looking good?
Yeah. I mean, there is evidence to support that. Biotech funding was extremely strong this year, and that takes depending on who you listen to, 6 to 12 to 18 months to flow through. So that would be a good sign for next year. Industry surveys around R&D pipelines for next year are very good. And not just the size of the pipeline, but even the percentage of that that's expected to be outsourced, which is our livelihoods. That's expected to grow by a couple percent, which is actually really significant. So, the signs are there. So the big thing I'm looking for next year is, does it actually pull through? And if it doesn't, my plan is to be, Johnny on the spot of why.
Yeah.
And if
now
it is,
it's a big
it's
wild
not
card
this
with the
here on the screen. Yeah.
we have the big wild card now with the new administration, and there's a lot of anxiety around that. Did they discuss this in the calls at all?
Not really. There are, as I think, even as we speak, there are some industry conferences. Jeffries had one. Yes, there's Jeffries. There's been a UBS one, and I can't remember what's going on today. But there are some industry conferences where this will be discussed a bit more, and I expect there to be some commentary, because these reports, these are very Q3 focused.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, Dan, were before a lot of the releases were before the election, let alone before the RFK.
Sure.
announcement. So it's just not a lot of not pertinent to those calls, but definitely now.
And
just
if
questions for you on the site side.
Yeah, the site side has been busy. I mean, we'll get into that in a little bit. If I have to commend CROs for anything, it's really being adaptable. Like they have, and I haven't been following them as closely as you. I've just because I've had to follow them as a site owner. But like whenever there's a new trend, like right now, it looks like it might be psychedelics. They're pretty quick to adapt. Like they go with the flow pretty well. So. And because they have to, right? So if there's like policy change or FDA is kind of favoring something, they have no other choice but to go with it. It's not like they can fight it and say no, we're not going to do it.
Well, you mentioned something I thought was absolute. It was great content. Like two of my favorite pieces of content from you this year was when you interviewed a private equity guy earlier in the year. I apologize, I can't remember his name or the firm's name. And more recently, it was just you. And you were talking about kind of like the financials of your company. And then more broadly, I believe, just correct me if I'm mistaken, because it's something I've seen too, where there were a lot of sites that are heavily, if not extremely concentrated in certain therapeutic areas, and especially vaccine and infectious diseases. And that absolutely stood out to me, that if there is funding disruption on that side, it is going to really devastate some sites and even some site networks.
Yeah,
that is something that I was looking to ask you about, with some more on the ground experience there.
Vaccines are like if you watch basketball, you live by the three, you die by the three. Like that's what that is. And there's some sites that all they do is shoot threes, and they pull up from half court and shoot them. And we don't do that. We play fundamentally. Like we throw it down to the post, do the boring stuff. A lot of that, because look, a lot of that is related to like public policy. I mean, COVID did a number on the public health's opinion of vaccines. Like it's not as easy to enroll vaccine candidates anymore, like on a recruitment level. There's a lot of skepticism, call it conspiracy, whatever you want. It's palpable. And it's a lot easier to just get obesity studies, GLPs and COPD, MABs, NIBs, the boring stuff. And I think sites should do that if you want to be consistent and keep your revenue solidly growing rather than just being volatile with these vaccines. And at the end of the day, these vaccines are not even like real studies. They are quick, they're high volume, they last a few weeks and they're done. Whereas the studies I'm used to doing take a year or 2 years of enrollment and then another year or two of open label. So totally different. One is like consistent revenue, projectable. The other is spikes, man. And I know a lot of sites that fall into the trap of relying way too heavily on that nice vaccine revenue.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Dan, I think playing back more into the slides here, I think that several of the CROs went into this year with large ambitions for buying up companies, not necessarily sites. I mean, Icon was the most specific about it. And I think coming into this year, a lot of sites highly concentrated on that side had very high ambitions for their own valuation, and that it's creating a disconnect. And a lot of these deals aren't going forward. I don't know how specific it is to those two types of companies, sites and CROs, but certainly a number of clinical research companies have had expectations of their valuation this year that aren't being met by the people looking to acquire. And
Yes.
I made some of it. Yeah.
No, you're right. And so we got to talk about Viva too. But yeah, and at the end of the day, there's only what, like a dozen CROs that are potential acquirers, and there's
not even that many
not
for
even
acquiring.
that.
Yeah, for actually acquiring, Dan, because I can't see that you would acquire one site or two sites. You got to have some startings. It doesn't mean you need to acquire like a velocity, but you got to acquire something with some scale that you can position, and to do that, vast majority of CROs are simply not set up for that. But the lack of deals on that has been very telling to me. And it's November 21st now, and there's still really very little that's been announced this year.
Yeah, what we're seeing is a lot of private equity. I'm in talks with a group now about doing it. We probably are going to get serious about being the platform, and then growing this site network. But yeah, the CROs, I haven't heard any. Like Akivia bought the one from Arizona, I think a year and a half ago for like 300 million or something.
Yeah, they bought Benchmark and then Cognitive.
Benchmark. Shout out to Mark Lacey, man. That guy's a
A
legend.
Yeah,
so the CRO, I don't know what the end game is really, because these PEs, they want to flip it to like hedge funds next. So because there's no more CROs to buy, like they all either bought sites or they're not gonna buy anymore.
Yeah, hey, fun fact: one of the largest CROs is owned by Goldman Sachs, and another larger, they're more mid-sized CROs owned by Blackstone. I mean, there's now those are the types of companies that could do some serious plays. And I mentioned McKesson, $80 billion company. They said they run clinical trials through 250 locations. Why not 400? Why not 500? You look at HCA Healthcare, massive hospital company. They own Sarah Cannon Research Institute, much smaller than McKesson's network. They have a joint venture with McKesson. That's $160 billion of market cap. They could do something. And McKesson's CFO was asked, "Are you guys going to buy a CFO, or are you guys going to buy a CRO?" He said, "We don't see a reason to. They could buy some sites. I wish they were asked that." Love to hear the response there. So there, there's a lot of potential there, but relatively speaking, not much happened this year compared to what I thought would happen.
Who does Goldman and Blackstone?
Goldman owns Parexel, and then they're not the only ones. And then Blackstone owns Precision, which is much more than a CRO. They have labs and health economics stuff and all kinds of things. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, that is super interesting market. So functional service provider, they're around 15 to 20%. This is the very.
For years. It's been this way for years. So there are signs, and in case you're listening and don't know what's FSP, what's full service, it's not a nice neat definition. Full service is easier to explain. It's XYZ Pharma comes out and says, okay, we want to run this new oncology trial, and hey, CROs, we want you to do the clinical operations work. We want you to project manage it. We want you to do the feasibility for the sites, do the data management, do the safety reporting, everything that you possibly can. And then, so the CRO will do that. Oh, and also CRO, we want you to pick the lab, pick the EDC provider, all the or most of the third-party vendors. So that's full service. You CRO, give us the whole service platform. FSP can come in different forms, but it can be, okay, we are XYZ Pharma. We plan to do 30 studies next year. We want you, CRO, to do the data management for all those studies. We're not asking you to do everything for all 30 studies. We want you to be, our data management provider for that. Or, we're going to do the data management ourselves, but we would like you to provide 30 data managers for us for the next 24 months. Or we want you to go out and hire for us, almost like a staffing model. So instead of, hey, provide everything, it's really focusing on this particular area And why this is such a hot topic in the CRO world is that when you provide a full service solution, you get to bring more of your resources in play. The contract values are larger, and the margins, the profit margins, tend to be higher. And that's almost the case in any industry where you can do a full service solution versus a more commoditized solution, right, which is FSP. So FSP tends to have lower margins. You can slice it up a couple ways, but so the extreme reaction, because there are signs that it's moving, the pendulum is moving a little more towards FSP. It's, oh my gosh, everybody's going to go FSP, and CROs aren't going to make any money, and they're going to be commoditized, and they're dead. And if that becomes the case, hopefully I'm one of the early ones to see it, but I really don't like to predict the future too much, especially out more than a year. And the signs really aren't there for some wholesale shift. It is known as a pendulum, FSP, full service, but it's not operating in a 0 to 100% range. It's 15 to 20%. It's a very tight range. It has been for decades.
Just anecdotally, I've noticed the FSP model has been utilized more when it's a big pharma as the sponsor, just from my own sites. I've been curious enough to figure it out and ask the CRAs, and it tends to be big pharma, like really big pharma, that employ that model with the CROs.
Yeah, because to employ that model, you as the sponsor have to have the infrastructure to manage it, provide the systems, provide the training, oftentimes provide the line management. It's all, there's so many different permutations of it, but a 10-person biotech would not be able to really do that. You've got to be able to have the scale to support that infrastructure. But then that's where the catch-22 comes in, Dan. That's why it's a pendulum that hasn't gone too far, because how many pharmas do you see going out there announcing, hey, we're going to hire 2,000 people next year, or we're going to invest in all this new infrastructure? They're looking to offload that, generally speaking, over time. And so if you've got a full service CRO and you want to go into an FSP model, you might be able to get lower rates from your providers, but there's a lot of staffing up and infrastructure you have to build yourself. And very few non-large pharmas can do that. XYZ Bio, really can't do that.
It would be interesting to keep an eye on that in the future. And to go with your slides, demand signs for R&D pipelines are positive, strong biotech funding, which you've discussed. You're optimistic.
Yeah, I'm optimistic, but if those demand signs do not pull through to CROs, I'll look for a couple things. Is it not pulling through for the CROs, but it's pulling through for others? And that will tell me something. If CROs basically start losing market share next year in the wide world of clinical research, that's something. If everybody suffers, then everybody suffers. And but if CROs do have as strong of a year next year as is expected of them, then those are the things I look for, kind of like what's the relative impact. So the demand signs are there. What will actually happen? We'll see.
Right. Yeah. And as a site, I don't see slowdown, at least from my own pipeline. Again, it's anecdotal. We only have like 5 therapeutic specialties, but I mean, it's enough, it's enough of a basket.
Well, and there's only a handful of publicly traded CROs, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
This thing is not reflective of all 700 or 800 CROs out there. It's extremely biased towards the largest.
One thing, Joel, that is interesting to me, I just thought of it now.
Yeah, please.
So when I first started, from 2005, that's when I started my first site, until really 2021, maybe, the majority of the studies I ever got were through CROs, right? You have to be on their database. They have a relationship with you. They send you surveys, all that good stuff. In the last 3 years, it's been not negligible, but it's definitely less important to get a study offer from a CRO. Like, you're getting it directly now from the sponsor, from a tech vendor like Inado. That's more the way that we've been getting studies recently. And I don't know, again, if it's anecdotal or it's indicative of some larger trend going on as far as the diminished importance of a CRO when it comes to site selection.
I'm not ignoring that. I mean, that's important feedback.
Yeah, like we used to go out of our way, like, oh, how do we become this CRO's preferred site? And now we don't really care. Like if AstraZeneca likes us or Eli Lilly likes us, I could care less who the CRO is. You know, they switch them out all the time. Let me just get on their good side with the MSL. Let me cozy up with the sponsor.
Well, Dan, in this slide, I had one on Velocity. First time I ever mentioned them because they were able to put 55 sites on one trial, which I found
All
that
right,
pretty.
Let's go to Velocity real quick,
Yes.
and then go back to Viva because I need to figure out what's going on there. Here we go.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's just, hey, 55 sites, and there was this phenomenal video I linked into between their CEO, I think it's Cross Tree Capital, and then a couple other owners of site networks, and it was absolutely phenomenal. I just recommend everybody watch it. I'm not even going to add anything to it. I just think it's.
This video.
It's
Okay.
really good. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, you can't. No clickable links on LinkedIn carousel. Sorry. But
We'll get it. We'll get it from the.
But a Velocity business development guy reposted this and talked about their efforts to go straight to biotech and pharma, even offering like risk sharing type strategies.
Wow.
And it's a struggle. It doesn't mean they're never having success on it, but stuff like that. You know, there are certain sizes of site networks where they're starting to get the leverage. You know, to push those decisions on too.
I can see it.
Sponsors to push those on. Yeah, I mean, that's
wow.
That's awesome in my view. Yeah,
I can see it, man. Like we've never been approached by a sponsor and say, hey, you know, you'll get paid more if you enroll this number, but if you don't enroll this number, you'll get paid less. But I'm actually for certain therapeutic areas, I am confident enough to do that. And so, but to do that at scale says a lot about the organization. And if you can actually pull that off, which it sounds like Velocity's headed in that direction.
Recruitments do this all day long. You know, it's often a paid per referred or paid per enrolled model through their database and things like that. But yeah, seeing some of the larger site networks do it. And you know, CROs have actually done it for a while, not necessarily proactively. It's more like the RFP says, send us a risk sharing proposal. So, okay, all right, we got to send something. But to see it done more proactively by sites and patient recruitment companies, that's just like little things catch on to.
Viva set out a huge 5-year goal of increasing its current $3 billion revenue target for 2025 to $6 billion by 2030. Before you roll your eyes, you might want to check this out. So it's a $1 billion in 2020. They achieved their 2025 goal of $3 billion set in 2019 is on track. So Viva's
Dan, you ever read any Jim Collins? You know, Good to Great.
Good to Great, yeah.
So he talked about. I can't remember what context it was, but the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goals that great companies often set for themselves. And the second I saw this, I was like, that's a BHAG. That's a BHAG. But what I didn't know is that it's the third one they've set in their history. And they always set it, in fact, a year ahead of the 5-year time frame. So you kind of look at this little chart here. You know, they set their 2015 goal in they set their 2020 goal in like 6 years before that. They set their 2025 goal in 2019. They're setting their 2030 goal now before they even met their 2025 goal, but they know they're going to meet it. So I know what, and it's my own response. If it's a company I don't know and I see, oh yeah, we're going to triple our revenue in the next 5 years, you give it the eye roll, like, yeah, whatever. You're trying to get 2% pop in your stock price tonight. But when I saw this history, this was part of their Investor Day presentation. I said, well, okay, all right, I'm not rolling my eyes at that. And then I said, okay, well, they're going to do it through acquisitions, or they made an announcement that they're going to be looking to go into new markets outside of life sciences, which they're already in one. They've been in consumer products for a while. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, they're going to say they're basically going to have to use acquisitions and these new markets to get there. I said, no, this is all through life sciences expansions of our current product.
They don't really acquire much. They do it themselves, you know, and they put themselves at all these conferences. They see what's trending, what's interesting, what they can do, and they take their time. They're rarely going to be first to market, but they end up, when they go all in, they dominate now, and they can get away with doing things like free for sites like eReg. I think they're the first ones to do eReg for free. They're a little behind, in my opinion, on CTMS and eSource, because if they were to offer that for free, it'd be game over already. But there's probably a reason why they haven't, and that's they're smarter than I am. I mean, they and it's their business, not mine. I'm just a selfish site owner.
Yeah, so I was impressed. They've obviously got to deliver, but it's not just that they set out the big goal. I found it very informative that they intend to do it strictly through life sciences, even though they're going into these other areas. This slide is even someone from Viva. Dan asked me at CNS Summit, what are these horizontal things you'll think we'll go into? And I'm like, if Peter, your founder, CEO, doesn't know, how the hell would I know?
I mean, they started out horizontal enterprise. They started out in sales reps software, right? That's like how they started, and then
they
they
built
got
off of
into
Salesforce.
yeah. So it makes sense. It's in their DNA. It's who they are. Metadata, meanwhile, I mean, I only know this EDC. Like, that's all I know, and EDC is becoming commodity. They have dominated, for what it's worth. Coordinators love it, but I don't know what
they've dominated, especially on the R&D side. I'm just really not that familiar with their commercial, post-marketing side. I don't even know if they have one. But as a guy who joined the industry in 2006 and has been on the pricing side, I mean, there was many years there where if you opened up a CRO's pricing tool and you went to the section where you select the EDC system, you had two options: metadata and other.
Right. Right.
And now it's just much more diverse, and there's cases where you don't even see metadata, and this shows it. Sorry for anyone watching this. It's basically showing that their year-to-date revenue is flat to the year-to-date is declining by 2%. And I just thought that was quite a contrast. One company says we're going to double from not just double from like 1 million to 2 million. We're going to double from 3 billion to 6 billion of life sciences technology revenue. And the other is saying, oh yeah, we're down on the year. Like, that's tough. It's tough.
Well, that's the problem with these tech vendors. So CROs, site networks, they're not really tech companies first. They might eventually start looking like tech companies, but their core competency is not tech. But companies like Viva and Metadata, who are on apparently two different trajectories, are seeing both sides of the spectrum when it comes to technology. And again, to use the three-pointer analogy, you live by tech, you die by tech. Viva's somehow pulling it off, whereas Metadata, tech's a deflationary force. If like CROs coming out with a EDC, I mean, these site networks are eventually going to have their own. The writing's kind of on the wall unless you can innovate, and Viva is doing that, it looks like. And Metadata, I don't know enough about them, but doesn't seem like it.
I mean, that's what the signs are showing.
Sorry to anyone at Metadata. I'm not sponsored by Metadata either.
No, Dan, that's why I really don't look I'm not a 10 years out into the future guy, and I'm grateful for the people who do. But that's just not me personally. And if you had told me 10 years ago that today it would look like this situation, that time Metadata was they were publicly traded on their own, and I mean, they were an absolute darling, absolute rocket ship.
Just think right now, 10 years ago, 2014, the preferred site network, the preferred site model thing for CROs was not even in office the first time. I think it was still Obama.
Yes.
There was no such thing as
Trump
pandemic.
Then,
yeah, I remember swine flu, like they were doing stuff like that. It's such a different industry, man. I was so opposed to eSource back then. I thought it was laughable. And now I can't live without it. So, I mean, 10 years is way too long, I think, to see the future.
Yeah. 10 years ago, I wanted to be a CFO. That was my career ambition. And now, look, I'm
look at you now, man.
Old consultant. Yeah, lonely old consultant. I love it. Love it.
You're doing live streams and getting 300 some odd comments on your post. I mean, geez, man. Fortria, buck the trend of bad book to bills. There's a math quirk that has to be factored in. Revenue down 5%. Revenue is the denominator. If their revenue is unchanged, so super performance.
Yeah, for the more of the finance geeks, which I am one on this call, a big way CROs are measured quarter by quarter. This is not an auditable metric, but it's something that it's kind of one of those things. It's not auditable, but they have to be truthful about it. Book to bill. What does book to bill mean? CROs are all about signing new contracts for future work. It's how you survive. And so you say, okay, what's the value of new contracts we signed this quarter divided by the revenue that we actually earned this quarter? And so you want the top number to be larger than the bottom number, because if you're signing more work than you're currently delivering, you're going to grow in the future. So the ratio is like 1.0 means that you just signed enough work to replace the work that you burned off. That doesn't mean, but that means you're not going to grow. So the ideal metric is a 1.2 or greater, that you are signing 20% more work than what you're currently delivering. All right, 1.2. And you saw that type of performance, if not higher, earlier in the year from CROs at large and in the past couple of years. So you're seeing strong numbers. Well, everyone dropped this quarter because of the cancellations. Because cancellations, Dan, if you have a big cancellation, that subtracts out of that top number, makes that top number smaller. Puts pressure on your ratio. Man. Okay, so from a math geek standpoint, if that denominator, anytime your denominator shrinks, that makes it more favorable for your ratio. Now, that's not a good thing, because that means your revenue is shrinking. Your revenue is going down. Companies don't like their revenues to go down. So yes, Fortrea reported a better ratio than just about everyone else. But whereas everyone else has growing or at worst flat revenue, Fortrea's revenue was down. It was down like 5%. So it created an easier hurdle for them to cross to get it. It's better than reporting a really bad number. But when you have multiple quarters of declining revenue, Syneos ran into this 2.5 years ago. It's a big reason why they had to go private. You have to have then multiple quarters of super performance on the top part, the new sales, the new bookings, to get things back in order to get back to growth.
And is Fortrea formerly Covance? Is that the one?
Yeah, so they were formerly Covance. They were spun off from LabCorp.
Gotcha. It's hard to keep track anymore,
well,
man.
And remember, shout out to my former colleagues. It is the former Covance plus Chiltern.
Chiltern. Oh my gosh, man. This is like a blast from the past. Remember INC Research before Syneos?
Oh yeah.
Man, they changed their names way too often.
Talk about 10 years ago.
I thought the dumbest name change was Quintiles. I thought that was a perfect name, and they changed to IQVIA, which makes no sense. But
it's worked out well for them.
I mean, stock price, yeah. So I guess it's good. Medpace. This is the one with the M that you said no.
What was interesting about this, Dan, was it's not just that they had a lot of cancellations and delays. Is one of the analysts that was asking questions, they were able to tease out some interesting commentary from their CEO, which is that Medpace has always been a very extremely disciplined business, and so if you're a sponsor and you're breaching your contract or something like that, like they've just been known over time as a tough company who doesn't take crap from customers. Admittedly, I'm a little biased towards that, but what August, they are another, like Viva, they're another founder-led, not founder-owned. I mean, he's still got a good share, but another founder-led company. And he said that there were some situations earlier in the year where some biotechs fell behind on their payments. Imagine a large site network doing this, or any site doing this, Dan. Customer fell behind on their payments. They terminated the contract. And then those biotech customers ended up getting funded and moving the work to other CROs. The question they were asked was, an industry analyst said, hey, we're hearing rumors that you've had some work canceled because of quality issues. And he's like, no, there's been 0 instances of that. What's happened, why you may have been hearing that, is because we terminated on some customers who then later got funding and moved their work somewhere else. So I've been the guy, Dan, when I was in-house, who a couple times had to threaten to stop work. And I held responsibility for the receivables team. And so that's why I put in there. I'm not here to judge them. Those are tough situations where you're paying sites and managing all these expenses, and the sponsor isn't paying you. So I'm not here to judge them, but that was like, to hear it talked about in public like that was very eye-opening to me. And then the bottom part is, if you're a CRO, you get these RFPs that saying, hey, we had to get rid of our CRO. We're going to move it to someone else. CRO is terrible. CRO screwed this study up. And as a CRO, you learn over time that it's never that simple of a story. And to me, it was like, that's why I put it's example number 5,000, whatever. And you never really know why a sponsor, especially a biotech, is switching CROs.
Of course.
They're never going to come out and say, well, we have to switch CROs because we never paid the last one on time.
Exactly. They always blame it on quality. I mean, we have like a very boutique CRO that we kind of mess around with, and we've been the rescue CRO before, and the story has always been, bad quality. We didn't really like, how they handled things. But when you looked under the hood and you network with the former CRO, you're like, no, they just never paid us. So it's makes sense.
Some of the best responses I got in my DMs were some horror stories around rescue studies. Yeah.
I think some of these pharma, well, it's usually not the big pharma that are not paying, but some of the CEOs in this industry would make great politicians. CROs this year have mentioned having several hundred to the very most low 5 digits of projects going on. Low 5 digits projects.
Like at most very small tens of thousands ongoing at a time. And this stood out to me because I started my career on like the retail real estate side, where you have hundreds of millions of customers, billions of transactions. And so your customer concentration risk, it's really, not there unless you're also running a credit card. But even then, you don't have 10% of your business with one customer, right? If you're Bath and Body Works or something like that. This business you do. And so it just really stood out to me that, remember, I'm a pricing consultant. So I'm focused on how service and technology providers are pricing their offerings, to stay profitable, to stay in the game and thrive and be successful. And so I was thinking about it, and I was, the potential impact on the vaccine side and just some of this extreme concentration. I was like, we got to make sure that we're compensating ourselves appropriately, managing our finances well, so we can serve customers who do the same, and then move on from those who don't. You need to have the ability to stay away from work that is not going to be good for you. Don't put yourself in a desperate situation by overleveraging yourself. Yeah.
Same thing with sites. We have a podcast live today with Dr. Al. He's basically saying the same thing. Be careful who you're getting the studies from. I mean, for sites, low 5 digits is huge. That's more than I thought. Sites are doing.
That's only the very largest CROs.
Right. The big 5, right? The big 5. Yeah. I mean,
but even then,
they'll
have 10 to 20 to 30% of their revenues tied up in their top 5 customers. That's in the wide world of business. That's extreme. Yeah, it's extreme.
Yeah, us too. I mean, we're probably gonna have $1 million year this year, and it's our 3rd year, and we've done it off of like 3 or 4 studies. I mean, we have more studies, but those are like the top 3 or 4 attributed most of that revenue. So it's just a scaling thing. Preclinical, clinical, Inc. Icon CEO.
Yeah, there's this perception. I used to believe in it until I just couldn't find data in there. Is that if the very preclinical side of the industry, animal models, right, early discovery, things like that in the very early labs, if you see a slowdown in spending there, then that's dire for the clinical and later phases of it. Intuitively, that makes all the sense in the world, right? If the very beginning of the pipeline dries up, that should affect the rest of it over time. I just haven't seen evidence of it. And it's not like I've seen evidence to the opposite way. It's just like I've become agnostic on it. You can't know. There's if you put it on a scatter plot or whatever, it would just be a big tangled mess. And so I just saw some further commentary on it very directly that just told me that, especially if you're an investor or something like that, you're like, oh, preclinical sucks, so it's going to get real bad for clinical soon. Not necessarily. That link is tenuous at the very, very best, and it's nothing has ever really been proven in any kind of a short to intermediate future.
Interesting.
Even Charles River, who plays in both spaces, preclinical and early phase, they said that, and with a lot of pharmas, especially reprioritizing their budgets, they're just moving money from preclinical to clinical.
I wonder if the new administration is going to allow, and maybe with AI, like skipping some preclinical and simulating a lot of it and going straight.
That's where you get over my head. Yeah, I just I don't have really a scientific or medical bone in my body, so that's there's a lot of other experts you could talk to who are vastly more knowledgeable about those things. Yeah, I just know that in terms of the economics, there's not some nice, easy, linear pull through from preclinical to clinical.
So it's not exactly logical the way you would expect it to be.
I just haven't seen a relationship, even a correlation at all. Yeah.
You guys learn something new every day on this podcast, right? And everybody go follow Joel right now. Who's got confidence?
Yeah, I got a personal story on this. So this is, I told you a lot of CROs saw real negative impacts on cancellations and delays. And CROs manage resources, people. All right. And so if your new business dries up, you've probably got too many. You may have too many people. And in the company, you saw when Icon reported pretty poor results, it was in tandem with a huge layoff. Huge layoff. I don't have the numbers, but yeah, huge layoff. They announced it, and then the impact is real. IQVIA doesn't mean they didn't reduce headcount at all, but they were very intentional that they're keeping people in reserve that may not be heavily utilized right now. They're keeping them in reserve for the bounce back. And so one, like respective levels of confidence about next year, that told me a lot. But Dan, as you were, I was in this industry during the great financial crisis, 07, 08, 09. And I was at PRA, which is now part of Icon. And I remember in like the depths of that, when you thought Chase and Citigroup and these banks were just going to disappear and the market was already imploding. The biotech was just getting smashed. I remember we were talking about the book to bill. I remember reporting a negative number where new bookings were negative. Your cancellations were larger than your new business. And I thought, oh, this is it. And I remember our CFO, one of the best CROs I've ever known or worked for or with, she said, I got to keep some people back because it's going to go back and I want them available when things come back. And it was just an absolute genius decision that really helped ensure PRA success for the future. And so when I just saw this, it brought back some personal stories, but just on its own, it says a lot about how each company looks into next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember those days too. Excluding COVID, I agree with you. Can we just stop reporting that? Especially now with the new administration.
Yeah. Next.
I mean, even if it was the old administration, it would still be next. Okay, share buybacks. Capital allocation focus of several large companies shifting from M&A to share buybacks. The good news is their shares are on the deep discount rack. So these are the CROs, right? The big CROs.
Yeah, really only the publicly traded ones. You don't see share buybacks for privately held companies. But I mean, the top right chart there, that's Icon. That's that descent on the far right side. That's on the very far right side and the top right of that descent there. That's extremely uncharacteristic for Icon. So you had these deep drops. Icon CFO, I was able to read this right before this. He was at Jefferies or UBS. He said, quote, "Our stock is a screaming buy at these prices." And that takes a lot to say that, publicly. So they certainly feel like their shares are on the deep discount rack.
Do you know what the average PE ratio is off the top of your head? Or
no, I do not. I don't really follow PE, price and earnings very much. But so they got slammed. And
so you got here IQVIA, Icon, Thermo, which is PPD, and what is this thing?
Medpace.
Medpace. That's the forgotten one all the time.
I don't even know if I did not put Fortrea on there because their priority is not share buybacks. They've got to work off debt. But Medpace is debt free, and the other three on there, their debt to equity ratios are very strong, very healthy.
And
So they've
Medpace
got
looks like the lowest, like you said with your slide, the lowest drop off.
lowest drop off they've had by far the strongest run up.
Yeah.
Right. So you get into some kind of mean reversion type
Interesting.
things. The ones that go up the highest, right, can fall the steepest. But anyways, it's I was just pointing out that whereas coming into the year, Dan, they were very focused on M&A, not Medpace. They don't do M&A. Now they're saying, well, actually, our main focus now is buying back our own stock.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's
will
shows
they, or is
confidence.
it? Well, yeah. Is it a confidence, or is it also in part a negotiating strategy to companies that are trying to acquire who want really high valuations to say, well, if you're going to keep asking for that price, we're just going to keep buying back our own stock. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. You ever see a hostile takeover in the CRO?
No.
Election results. Part 1. Everything took a dive in life sciences for the most part.
Yeah. Let's just say real quick on the hostile takeover. I
Yeah.
guarantee you, Syneos did not want to go private at the price it went private at a couple years ago. That was not fun for anybody because that was down like 50% or more from their highs as of just like a year or two before that. So it wasn't hostile. And then you look at like a Science 37, that wasn't hostile, but I'm sure they didn't want to get bought for 30 cents a share or whatever it was.
Ouch. Science 37, forgot about them. Election results. I am as apolitical as possible, especially on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
RFK News.
But then this was the vaccines and site networks, which is really much more your wheelhouse than mine. But it's but there's two parts: it's site networks, but also there were a lot of technology companies who the reason they exist today is because they were able to raise tremendous amounts of money from venture capital, especially in the 2021, 2022 free money days. And that was off the backs of infectious disease research, especially COVID. So if there is a freezing or some kind of a drawdown on funding around vaccine research, that's going to really hit certain companies within the industry who are super concentrated in that therapeutic area.
Yeah, we've discussed this a little. Velocity, this was a good slide, I think. I was at one of these. To me, this is not surprising. I was at an investigator.
Is this the one you were talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And there are actually
named the site network, but I was curious. Yeah.
Yeah, there were 2 site networks there. I can't remember the other one. This was a big obesity study. There was like hundreds of sites, maybe 130. And
Wow.
I swear, man, half of them were represented by these 2 site networks that were there. And that was, to me, eye-opening. So this slide, although it's eye-opening, definitely, if you're not prepared for this, like, I've seen this with my own eyes already. And yeah, this is definitely not going away. This is here.
Yeah.
This is a new trend.
I'll just say on that last slide, if you're listening and you're interested in following more of the site side of it, that first link is to Velocity's own newsletter talking about that. And I'm on that newsletter, and it's a great read.
Is this video on their website as well, or
it's YouTube?
YouTube.
It's YouTube, and it's through the private equity company's account.
Okay.
But I think I may have seen it through their newsletter, like a link to it. But yeah, they do a good job of talking about what they do publicly. So that's how I found out.
I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Up for sale, Certara putting its regulatory and medical writing business up for sale. I would not buy.
Yeah. Dan, some of these slides I write for everybody. Some of these, there's a couple people I know would be very interested in this, and that sums up this. But I was kind of, regulatory and medical writing, that's just considered a very niche part of the industry. So to see that much annual revenue at a relatively small company, Certara, I was like, whoa, hello.
Listen, I'm pretty naive to that niche as well, but I can't imagine I would be comfortable as a buyer with the tech that's happening, unless they are becoming that tech too, which maybe they are.
And I think if they were, they wouldn't be doing this. So they're clearly seeing some struggles.
Yeah. Walgreens. I talk about this with Darshan. Shout out to the Fraud Pod.
Yeah, Fraud Pod. Yes.
What is this? The Boots Initiative, BARDA Award.
BARDA, large. BARDA within NIH, very large purveyor of federal funds for clinical research, have been forever. And so Walgreens won a huge award, 2 large awards. One of them was particularly large last quarter that I wrote about last quarter. But what I liked here, I like it, Dan, when you obviously do the very best of this, when these businesses share like the tangible outcomes of the work they do. And so, Walgreens had put up a post where they talked about opening the first batch of sites under this initiative. And you could actually see the site. And they gave metrics of like how many patients they enrolled in certain timelines. Yeah, it's part of their marketing or whatever, but there were things they wrote in there they didn't have to. So I was really appreciative of that. But I also posted it because like Walgreens is another roll your eyes company, right? Like, oh yeah, what impact are they going to have? The 2 BARDA awards they won have a total backlog of up to 125 million, and they don't. I'm not saying they don't work through any CROs. I don't know, but I don't have inside information. But they were winning these things straight through NIH or through BARDA, straight through sponsors. It's don't ignore these guys.
A few slides ago, I mean, I roll my eyes so far back, it's like exorcism. But get it, well, Too Short said it best. Get it while the getting's good, because that NIH, it's not guaranteed tomorrow. So congrats to Walgreens.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Congrats to that. Get it while the getting's good. That's a good song. Okay. Tempest AI, never heard of.
Yeah, and they're a cool company. I don't mean this in a bad way. I don't know if I'll keep tracking them. I'm tracking them because a few years ago they bought an oncology CRO, Highline Sciences, and so they've got this CRO as part of their operations. They also they went public back in June. Dan, I mentioned at the bottom there, their shares skyrocketed, and at one point earlier this month they were up 115% from their IPO. And so I like to use this almost in jest. I selfishly want more of these companies to go public, but just again for selfish purposes. And I say, hey, if you ever want a case study in how your valuation post IPO could be, or at IPO could be much higher than you could ever dream of, let me tell you about Tempest.
Well, you might get your wish. I mean, this new administration, expecting a surge of new IPOs at middle of next year and onwards. So you might get your wish. I think this is
might get my wish, yeah. But their CRO is tiny, 10 million a quarter.
Sure.
So in the world of what I follow, 10 million is very small. So I don't know if I'll be tracking them much more.
I'm glad you put them on my radar. I had never heard of them, so I'll be watching them.
They're cool. They're out in Chicago. Cool little company.
Yeah, maybe I'll reach out. Hey, Tempest, give me a study or two. Always more to discover.
Real quick. I watched them because they were doing AI before AI was popular. Now their AI is much more facing towards physicians and health systems and things like that. That's the bread and butter of their business. But
okay,
I got to see some of it firsthand with them. So they were doing it before it was popular. So it's just
respect to them. I'm glad to hear that.
Legit AI.
Using AI as a gimmick to get funding is but that sounds like they're the right kind of people.
It's not a spreadsheet to help you do better Facebook ads for patient enrollment. Like, it's real AI. Yeah,
I think I will. I think I'll reach out. I'll try to get a study. We talked about this McKesson 250 sites joint venture. This is like a new pod for you right here.
Gosh, well, that's where I'm like, okay, I gotta confine myself. Right, we're at slide 20, and it's like as soon as you think you're tracking everything relevant, you come across $160 billion of market cap, heavily involved, especially McKesson involved. And you're just like,
well, you know what though? I mean, the macro story here is public funding, right? Again, new administrations tend to change things up, and this one's not been shy about. They're going to be heavily scrutinizing public funding and where that's going. So I think this would be an interesting one to look at 6 months from now, 12 months from now. And then China's here. Wow. What happened to Wuxi? Remember them? Wuxi?
The Biosecure Act.
The Biosecure Act.
Biosecure Act.
I held that stock for like a month.
Oh, really?
This like in 2015 when they went IPO, I think I bought it. Yeah, not recent. Hell no.
I think what this is a good example of is the Biosecure Act hasn't even passed yet. And I don't know what the new administration means for it, but what I found amazing about it was just the existence, the proposal of it was extremely impactful. And then I apologize to whoever wrote this excellent report because I can't remember who did it. They showed the effect of that on the trust level that biopharmas have in those companies. And it's like, it doesn't matter at this point if the Biosecure Act passes or not, the damage has been done.
Damage,
The
yeah.
reputational.
The
And you
jury's
read,
out. What do they call it in court? Like, you may not be guilty by the jury, but you're guilty by public opinion.
yeah, guilty by public opinion. And I won't say much more about it, but you read some of the stuff in those
Yeah.
reports
Yeah.
about clinical research in China at some of these military institutions.
Yep.
And I'll leave it there for people to read on their own time.
I've worked with as a site a Chinese sponsor, and I was very nervous. And sure enough, yeah, they stopped paying their sites. We got ours. We got like 95% of what was owed to us, but I know some sites were not as vocal and didn't. And when you're not on the same playing field, like, it's not a two-way street of transparency when the other side, the other country, is a authoritarian nation that
Yeah.
uses capitalistic elements. At the end of the day, they're still do what they say. The CCP is what runs it, and you can't compare the two. So I don't disagree with the Biosecure Act. I think Darshan actually broke this down pretty well 6 months ago on the pod. But yeah, I think it's over for this stuff. I mean, 10 years from now we could re-explore, but at least for the short term, I think there's nothing here anymore.
This might be the last. It's kind of like a standing slide each quarter, and I think it'll
Yeah.
be, unless new news comes out, I think that'll be
Nah, I
it.
don't think so. And then this is the most important slide. So
Thanks.
this is where you can email Joel all your questions.
Yeah, Dan's got
You're
linked.
putting
Yeah.
your Calendly out there. You've got some balls, man. Calendly.
No, it's the opposite actually. It's a way, it's that way people feel like they have access. It's easy for me to decline random stuff I don't want to deal with,
Okay.
but it's more for my clients. But yeah, Dan's
Okay.
here on LinkedIn showing us on LinkedIn that newsletter link. Like if you want to track what I do, what I write about publicly, there you go. That's the thing.
We gotta,
And that's through LinkedIn. The newsletter is through LinkedIn.
through LinkedIn. I subscribe already. It's a very well. You write really well, man, and
So do you.
Thank you. You put a lot of work into your articles, which is something I appreciate, because it's very easy now to use AI to just generate some shit, but to actually put some thought into it and make it your own and make it valuable for the audience, it's kind of rare. So you're one of the ones I follow.
Well, I'll
Since
give
day
a
one.
shout out to a company called Quarter, Quartr, no E at the end, Quartr. And I would not be able to do this without their platform. I don't, I have no interest in them, like financially or anything like that. I've been trying, Dan, to get them to do a 20-minute webinar with me and record it, but I guess I'm not subscribed at their top tier or whatever. But for $25 a month, I get to read transcripts of everything these companies talk about. It makes it super efficient for me. I can see what other companies say about those companies, and they keep me updated on what's going on, like the conference is going on this week. So it's just it's a wonderful product.
Wow.
And it saves me an immense amount of time.
Interesting. I'm looking at their website now. I'll consider it.
If you don't want to pay the money, I think their phone app is free, and you can still get the transcripts and stuff on there. I need it on desktop, so yeah.
I'll do that. Yeah, I have way too many recurring subscriptions, man. But
That's
Joel,
right off. So yeah.
that's very important. Joel, this was great, man. You put a lot of time into this. I really think everybody needs to go connect with Joel right now. Again, follow him and then subscribe to his LinkedIn newsletter. It's amazing. And you'll be more informed whether you're a sponsor, CRO, site owner, tech vendor, whatever employee in the space. It doesn't matter. You need to stay informed and abreast. And if I can help curate, the value from the junk, Joel's definitely in the former camp. The value, not the junk.
The feeling is 100% mutual. So anyone on here who's not already familiar with Dan's work, sign up for all the things.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Go connect right now. Like, subscribe, comment, share. I gotta go meet with an investigator, Joel.
Okay.
The sponsor, I need this study. The sponsor said, we want to give you this trial, but you need a nephrologist that at least does a sub-I. And so one of my investigators, his wife, is a nephrologist. But now I got to go convince her. So I got to brush my hair,
Yeah.
look presentable, and go
I think
talk
I
to
did this morning. Yeah. I was like, I got to meet with Dan. I got to wear a collared shirt.
Oh, man. Now you can wear a hoodie, hat, backwards, whatever hat you want. It's all good, man. But yeah, I got to run. But Joel, this
Okay.
was great, man. Everybody go connect with him right now. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye-bye.